What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at ARM Holdings stock, ticker symbol ARM, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, February 23rd. Well, you guys, ARM stock finished the day today up $5.14 a share, 4.17% here. Let's take a look here. Just really quick, if you guys like me covering ARM stock, if you wouldn't mind, leave a like. It's free, it's easy, it's quick, and it helps out tremendously, more than you'll ever know. So let's take a look here, starting with the 1 minute chart. What I want to do, first of all, the stock is down after hours a little bit. It's down less than 1%, about 0.9%. But listen, as you'll commonly hear me say, you have to take after hours movement, whether it's in your favor or going against your sentiment, with a grain of salt, because look here. Look, I have the volume completely as extended as it'll go, and you can barely see the volume bars here in the after hours. Volume is incredibly low after hours, and it's really easy to move stocks around when volume is so low. Okay, so take after hours with a grain of salt, but if we look here at the 1 minute chart, you can see we got a big pop in pre-market heading into the open and off the open, and then we faded, but we were able to retain a big portion of that overnight move, of course, a lot in thanks to Nvidia's eye-popping earnings. But let's move on now to the 5 minute chart and take a look at the volume profile as we look here at the regular trading hours. So you can see here, what are we looking for, right? We're looking for obvious volume that correlates with obvious moves in price to tell us, okay, for example, if you see a big opening drive, right, on big, huge volume, and the volume is consistently high, and then you see a dump off but the volume tanks on the dump off, that's going to be something that bulls, for example, would want to see. You always want to see as much volume as possible when a stock is moving in your favor, and as little as possible when a stock is moving against you. So if we look here at ARM today, you can see we had that big pop and on, big volume. Now, I typically expect that first volume candle, it's almost always the biggest volume candle of the day. But this one, we actually got additional volume as we pushed to the regular trading hour intraday high here today. And I think that volume push is really interesting, actually exceeding the first 5 minute bars volume. And then as the stock pulls back, for a lot of the remainder of the day, including that consolidation, we saw lower and lower volume. Of course, it pumped a little bit, the volume did, into the close, but that's not unexpected at all. Okay, moving on here, let's take a look at the 30 minute. This is where we start getting really contextual about the next day. So as we head into tomorrow, which is Friday, you can see here that currently we are sitting right on top of that 200 period moving average, and we're right between the 200 and the 50 period. So from a bullish perspective here on ARM stock tomorrow, ideally, what I would want to see is a move up, well, first of all, a hold of the 200 period, and then a move upside above the 50 period. Okay, so move the stock up, retest, bounce off the 50, claim the 50 as support, and move higher. If you're a bear, it gets really simple. You just want to see a fade below the 200 period and a continuation downside. Okay, really simple here on the 30 minute here today. Let's take a look at the 4 hour. You can see at the 50 period, that white line is immediately relevant. And we're basically right up against it. That is just below 125. Stock currently at 127. So again, a retest of that. Bulls, we're going to want to see a bounce, but bears, your primary concern, looking at the 4 hour chart here, you're going to want to see a downside break through the 50 period and continuation. If not a retest, hold as resistance and then a fade. Okay, bulls, just a bounce, get up through 130, maybe even 135, though that is quite a bit of a move away. But we've seen crazier things on ARM. Okay, now, on to what is arguably the most important chart of all, and that's going to be the daily. Okay, why is it the most important? Well, everybody's watching this chart. Okay, this is a very common chart to watch, and you have here like the 50-day moving average, all right, and the 200 moving average is actually, we're not going to have that yet, because you look back here, it's a recent IPO. Okay, IPO'd September of 23, so we're not going to have that 200-day quite yet. But even the 50-day is not really immediately relevant because we've had that push here. Okay, so the story becomes really obvious now on the daily. All right, what would the majority of people be looking at, even if they didn't have a super deep understanding of TA? Well, it's going to end up being whole numbers, and the most obvious whole number, I think, is 130. Okay, so really, I mean, even if we look at the after hours movement, if we include that, stock's at about 127, down a little bit, closed at 128.50. Ideally, what I'm looking for in the next day, two, from a bullish perspective, hold 125, get back above 130, move upside toward 135, 140. Okay, and if you're a bear, you really want to see 130 hold as a rejection, as a potential resistance, get down through 125, head down toward 120. If you're bearish right now on ARM, that's really what I think most bears are going to be looking at. Now, implied volatility, if you are looking at options at all, take a look at this. It's faded as of late in comparison to the last like 2 weeks. It has faded hard, but it's still sitting high if you're comparing to the last few months here on ARM. So what you want to do, at least what I like to do, when you're looking at options trades, first of all, you can only compare IV to itself. You can't compare ARM IV to Tesla IV. Right? You have to just compare it to itself because it's going to be very different across any security. And then you have to only compare it to your intended trade time frame. What I mean by that is if you're trading options that expire in 2 weeks, for example, you don't really want to be comparing to the IV in the last 6 months. It's not really relevant. You really want to be comparing the IV over the last maybe 2 to 4 weeks. And if you're buying or selling options that expire in 8 months, for example, what IV has done in the last 3 days, unless it's been a tremendous change, is not really all that relevant. You really want to be looking at where it is in comparison to the last 6 to 12 months. Okay, so understand that the higher IV is, this directly influences the value of calls and puts through the Greek vega. And the higher IV is, there's more juice pumped into those contracts through vega, and the higher the risk of IV crush if IV falls. Okay, now the lower IV goes in relation to your intended trade time frame. Typically, you're going to have more options buyers looking to buy, okay, when IV is low, because a lot of that vega value is sucked out of those contracts, and any return to the upside in IV will put juice back into those contracts, which can help make money, assuming you're right directionally. It can beef up the profits. Okay, now let's finish out here by taking a look at the options bias on ARM today. 286,000 total contracts traded. 185,000 of those were calls, about 100,000 of those were puts. So we are seeing some relatively heavy call side bias on ARM stock here today. The short-term speculators at 0 to 20 delta range, 62,000 calls, 55,000 puts. So a little call heavy, but relatively undecided here. And then if you look here, every single delta range, so that's out of the money, at the money, in the money, short-term sentiment, mid-term sentiment, longer-term sentiment, all of them are leaning to the bullish side, to the call-heavy side, which I think is interesting here today. But listen, as always, make sure your risk is managed. The options traders can, of course, be wrong. Listen, if you got value out of that, you want me to keep covering ARM stock here, first of all, let me know in the comments section, and please subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.